It's been a snowy few days here, so the bike's been off limits. I haven't bought the BMW snow change yet for the RT, so I can't go out in the snow. So yeah, it's been rather frustrating. So I'm obviously keen to go out and play with my new toy. But one thing I have done is been thinking about safety. So I picked up a tip somewhere, I can't remember where it was, and invested a £2 safety modification. See if you can spot the difference. What do you think? So for me, for £2, and something that's actually very easy to remove and very easy to apply, it's just taken me an hour or so just with a pair of scissors and lots of snipping to just create a bit of a pattern on the bike. I attended the Biker Down course a couple of nights ago, and the third module is one on conspicuity, all about being seen on the bike and the pros and cons of high-vis. But I would argue that the police and the emergency services do actually wear high-vis, so if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for me. And the aim, I think, is try to create a pattern that looks unusual and actually catches the eye. I mentioned on a previous video that when I worked in the aerospace industry, the defence industry, one of the modifications we made to one of the aircraft we were working on was actually to fit lights in the leading edges, so that when an aircraft was flying towards you in a warfare situation, the idea is that the light in the leading edges would blend with the ambient light behind the aircraft, and therefore in effect hide the silhouette of the aeroplane. But for me, so I can argue, you can argue that under some conditions that high-vis probably doesn't work. You know, if you're in a very, let's say, a bright yellow environment, lots of autumn leaves and maybe very sort of strong sunlight actually behind you. But I think for most, what I was looking for really was almost like a defensive shield really from the rear. And I think in 19 times out of 20, when someone's coming up the back of me now, I think I've got a better chance of being seen rather than the silver and gold paint scheme of this particular RT. So that's what I've actually gone for. So that's been my plan. And I just think, just for a couple of pounds, it's been well worth doing. I don't really think it's spoiled the look of the bike at all either. It's just you know, you really actually can't see it from the side. Maybe at some point I might think about putting some yellow reflective strips down there, but only could be in a cheapskate. I only spent £2 and just got a couple of metres of it, so ran out when I got to that bit. But I don't know whether I want to put them on that bit anyway. So because I wear a high-vis jacket as well, so I've got the optional day riding lights. They call them angel eyes, don't they, that sit at the front of the RT. So I mean, at the end of the day, you can only do the best you can, and I think in terms of decorating your bike, I think that's probably about it. That's all I would go for. I don't think I'd be sticking any high-vis on the fairing at the front, because I think that's then going to start to actually detract from the looks of the bike, and that's not something I'd want to do. And of course then you've got the other options of safe riding on the on any kind of motorbike, actually, haven't you, where you know you're approaching, let's say you're riding along the road and there's a guy in a car wants to pull out on the from a junction on the left hand side, and does he see you or not? So the option there is that you actually sort of do a bit of an S shape, you do a bit of a wiggle in the road, and you maybe sound your horn, you let him know that you're there, and you also adopt a defensive position where you slow down and assume he is going to come out. So of course that's I guess we're into sort of both passive forms of being seen and also active passive forms by you know, your high-vis vest and, you know, sticking a bit of this high-vis tape on, which is, you know, cost peanuts, or the active sort of defensive mechanism, which is basically adopting different positions in the road. So that's something I'm hoping to learn quite a bit more about when I get into the IM. But just while I'm stood here as well, I'll just mention as well the Biker Down course. Strongly recommended. If you haven't done it, please do sign up. I get the impression there's quite a few of those operating over the winter, so just contact your local fire and rescue service and ask what's going on. You probably see details on Twitter and social media as well. But for me, it was a good sort of 3.5 hours. It was very low key, very relaxed. Ours was actually delivered by the local blood bikers group for Oxford, Bucks and Northants, I think it is, and very well delivered. A combination sort of fronted up as well by one of the local firemen there as well. So, and essentially you get 3 modules. So what it's all about essentially is that, you know, you come across the scene of an accident. You might be on your bike, you might be in a car, you know, you might be at the side of a road, but let's say you're first on the scene, and the big thing then is how are you going to manage the next 30 minutes. So I think what I would take out of Biker Down was that it essentially gives you some keys as to how to manage that 30 minutes. Now, it's not going to turn you into an expert. It's not going to turn you into a fireman, a policeman, or you know, one of the paramedics. But what it will do is what these sort of first responders, as they call them in the States, or you know, the emergency practitioners, as we maybe call them over here in the UK. What they will always say is that first few minutes is absolutely critical, and you're on the scene, you're going to take charge of the situation, so what are you going to do? So module 1 is essentially you've arrived on the scene. What are you going to do? How are you going to make the situation safe? You know, where are you going to park your bike? What should you do, what shouldn't you do? What about looking after number 1? Obviously if you get hurt, then the emergency services then have 2 casualties to deal with. So again, you've got to look after yourself. And what about when you get the crowd stood around, you know, and they're sort of, you know, flashing off cameras and, you know, taking bits of videos to put up on social media of this particular accident? How do you manage that situation? What about actually how do you actually deal with the biker who is in that situation, who is down, maybe angry, maybe upset, maybe very badly injured? So what's going to go on there? And I think then the second session, module 2, then is really then about the sort of first aid. And it's obviously only sort of a basic introduction to first aid. You can do a proper first aid course, and they will always stress that Biker Down module 2 doesn't replace proper first aid training. But again, it's just a couple of keys really. So one of the things, for example, is about should you or should you not remove the helmet. So again, I'm not going to answer that question because I'm not qualified to do that, and I'd much rather you did the Biker Down assessment yourself. The Biker Down training yourself. Let the professionals tell you what and why to do. What would you do in a situation of a serious bleed? You know, so for example, as a biker, do you actually carry a first aid kit? So I was very fortunate the other night because our session was run by Blood Bikers, and they had a very good deal on some first aid kits there. So I snaffled up one of those. So now I've actually got my own first aid kit. Again, I'm not a medical practitioner. I've actually done 3 first aid courses as part of my cricket coaching, so I've got a basic appreciation, but absolutely not a my practitioner. But I think I'd like to think at least I know some of the basics to handle. And then module 3, what's that all about? Well, module 3 was quite a surprise to me actually, because again, it's essentially, I can't remember the exact name of the module, but it's all about conspicuity, about being seen, and about the pros and cons of things like high vis, and about some of the tactics that you can adopt. And Saccadic viewing as well, which is, I don't know whether you've come across this, I'll put a link on the video, but this is essentially where when we turn our heads, our eyes cannot take a video of, let's say, 90 degrees front. If you're looking front and then you were to look 90 degrees to your right, your eyes can't take a sort of a full 90 degree video, because essentially it would just look like a blur. So what your brain effectively does is it steps in and it takes a series of snapshots. And this is very interesting actually, because you know, when you see these sort of horrific videos on YouTube, you know, where the motorist is sort of pulled out in front of the motorcyclist, and the motorcyclist T-bones him, hits him, flies over the bonnet, gets up really angry, his bike's been bent, and the motorist says, "Sorry mate, I didn't see you." And we tend to think, well actually, surely you saw me, you were looking right through me. But actually what Saccadic viewing actually lets you know about, or sort of helps you to understand, is the brain takes a series of snapshots. So there are sort of blank spaces within those snapshots in the motorist view, because he's in a hurry normally, and we all do it. So we've really got to focus when we're in our car or when we're on our bike and we pull out at that, when we're at that junction, when we turn our heads to the right, just to really sort of stop and look and have a think about that. So again, I'll put a link up to another video on that, another video which I thought just 2 minutes, which was really excellent, I have to say. And I think it just shows you why, as a motorcyclist, you have to ride in a very defensive fashion actually. So which is, you know, one of the things I'm really starting to sort of learn and appreciate now. When I bought the bike, I was pleasantly surprised to see that actually it's got these full Krauser engine and fairing protection bars on. So I haven't got any protection at the back. Might want to think about that at some stage to actually protect the panniers, but maybe that's a bit over the top. But certainly if the bike ever was dropped, then these I would imagine these bars must do a pretty good job. So that's good to see as another sort of safety sort of option on the bike. And then as well as that, I mentioned that this bike has the as the Angel Eyes as well. And again, I think they do a pretty good job because they are quite distinctive actually. They are, in that sense, eye-catching, so you do notice them. They're at a particular distance. At some stage, what I'd like to do is think about fitting the Hex Easy Can on the bike as well, which essentially is a wiring harness that plugs into your CAN bus on the RT, because you can't just tap any old wire into it, otherwise you upset the computer system on the bike, the sort of data bus, CAN bus that's actually sort of ferrying information around the various sort of elements of the bike. So you attach the Hex Easy Can, and then to the Hex Easy Can then you can actually use that to program your lights in different ways, program your indicators, link them with your horn. But also what I'd think about at some stage as well is maybe fitting some extra sort of spotlights maybe down on those sort of lower engine protection bars that are actually protecting the protruding side of the cylinder head. So that's another option as well for safety in the future. So, and I think then by then I'll probably have a full set. So, but obviously I have to explain this business case very carefully to the financial controller to justify probably another 200 quid for the Hex Easy Can, and then maybe another 50 quid or so just to fit some decent LEDs and some brackets on there as well. So, but obviously we'll post another video if and when I can get financial approval for that. So just another thought as well, just to more grist for the mill in terms of riding safe.